Astonishing Legends would like to thank Best Fiends, Simply Safe, Quip, Mint Mobile, our contributors at patreon.com, and you, our listeners, for making tonight's show possible.
In October of 2016, two not-so-young men were entering their second year as podcasters. Halloween was approaching, and having built a modest audience, they felt compelled to produce something particularly dark and interesting that year. So they chose to cover the story of the Mothman and the tragic collapse of the Silver Bridge around Christmas of 1967 in Point Pleasant, West Virginia. One does not simply talk about the Mothman without invoking the Touchstone 2002 film adaptation of John Keel's The Mothman Prophecies. So, of course, those two not-so-young men, Scott and Forrest, made frequent references to it in Astonishing Legends' first 5-part series on the Mothman, that they pretended was 4 parts by calling the last 2 parts 4A and 4B. You know, this is the cheesiest cold open. Why am I reading this in the third person?
Just keep going. It's great.
Oh, man. All right. Sorry. Gotta get serious here. Hold on. Little did Scott and Forrest know, the man who adapted Keel's book into a screenplay was listening, and when he heard his name mentioned during an episode, he nearly ran his car off the road. Since then, Richard Hatem, or Rich, as we like to call him.
I think everyone calls him Rich. Just stick to the script. Stick to the script. Don't throw in your own stuff here.
Because it's such a gem. All right, here we go. Has been a guest on Astonishing Legends numerous times, and we frequently find him just sitting in the driveway outside of Blanket Forteana reading books in his car with a flashlight. Rich, however, was not the only person that would enter the astonishing orbit in 2016. Another individual, Rob Kristoffersen. Why do I always have a... I could say
Chris Kristoffersen. Same thing.
Yeah, I know. This is different, though.
Yeah.
Another individual, Rob Kristoffersen. I like to give Sarah like 50 takes on one sentence every session.
Yeah, that are all the same.
I know, she appreciates that. I know. Another individual, Rob Kristoffersen of the Our Strange Skies podcast, was incessantly tweeting obscure UFO facts at Scott and Forrest that year as well. Eventually, they invited him to join the Astonishing Research Corps to both unmuck up their Twitter feed and also become Astonishing's in-house UFO expert. Before too long, someone started a Twitter DM group between the 4 of them, and somewhere along the way, Forrest was talking about the legend of Alexander the Great's UFO encounter, and Rob chimed in to point out that story was bunk. Rich then dubbed our group the Fortean Buzzkills. More on that in tonight's show. Rob has been a guest on the show many times as well, and we have been on his as well. Rich has also been a guest on Rob's show. This is not in the third person anymore, and on top of that, this is really confusing.
No, just go with it. People can follow it. Trust me.
I can't follow it. Okay. All right, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
All right, take 2. Here we go. Rob has been a guest on the show numerous times, and we have been on his as well. Rich has also been a guest on Rob's show. If Rich had a show, we'd probably be guests on his show too, but to date, he does not. Okay, this is the worst piece of crap you've ever written.
You're almost done, man. All right, now this is it. Bring it home. Narrator voice. Do your narrator voice.
Right.
I wish I could do this. I can't do it. You got to do it.
It's a strange time in the world right now. Personal schedules have been upended, and it just seemed like a good time to have both Rich and Rob on Astonishing Legends to talk shop, as it were. Welcome to the Fortean Buzzkills and Rich. Roundtable number 1.
That was great. I like that one. Welcome back to Astonishing Legends. I'm Scott Philbrook, and this is Forrest Burgess.
I don't know why I agreed to do this episode. From me, Forrest Burgess, which I think I've said before about a few other episodes, and it was also said by Rich Hatem, I think, when we first had him on.
Join us tonight as we welcome back good friends of the show, Rich Hatem and Rob Kristoffersen, for a kitchen sink roundtable with very few rules and no outline really, because that one guy on iTunes says we're overproduced now.
And we're back.
No housekeeping really tonight, other than I wanted to dedicate this show to 2 musical giants who recently passed away, John Prine and Hal Wilner. If you think you haven't heard of John Prine, it might be because he was best known as a songwriter, but if you like music, you've listened to his songs. Angel from Montgomery, Bruised Orange, In Spite of Ourselves. And if you haven't heard them, pull them up on Spotify. Well, there's tons of beautiful versions of them. Be sure and listen to Prine singing them himself. Forrest and I had the very good fortune to see Prine at the Greek Theater in Los Angeles in 2016. It was the only time I got to see him perform, but it was a fantastic show, and I'll certainly never forget it. Hal Wilner was far less famous than Prine, but not only was he friends with Prine, he was a massive influence for decades in the music world, and more than that, Hal was a dear friend of my wife. Hal and my wife worked together for 9 years at Saturday Night Live, and we would sometimes see him in Los Angeles as well after she left the show, where he had what I would honestly call one of the last little original shack-like bungalows on the canals in Venice Beach, which was surrounded by huge multi-million-dollar homes. I'm pretty sure it was a rental. As a music supervisor for SNL right up until his passing, he was a genius, but he was also a music producer with an uncanny ability to take artists that you would never think of working together and invite them to create beautiful collaborations in the form of tribute albums. In fact, this is what he was most known for. My wife was around him a ton more than I was, but in the handful of times that I had the privilege of hanging out with him, I marveled at his encyclopedic knowledge of all genres of music, going back to the beginning of recordings, as well as the way his mind was able to mix and match genres and artists, much like Jackson Pollock would sling paint in every direction to create a masterpiece. On top of all of this, Hal was a sweet, kind, and generous man that made you feel calm just by entering the room, and he was far too young to die. You can tell a lot about him by reading his last tweet, which he wrote as he suffered from the coronavirus in his apartment in New York City. This was just 9 days before he died. It's not about him at all, but about his friend John Prine, who was also suffering from corona. Sending love to John Prine, who is in critical condition with COVID-19. John is a music giant. His songs are as good as it gets, and he's a spellbinding performer. Send good thoughts his way. And then Hal goes on to quote Prine. I sound like that old guy down the street that doesn't chase you out of his apple tree. Hal Wilner and John Prine both passed away on April 7th, 2020, and it's a great loss for all of us.
Yeah, I was sorry to hear that, my friend. Before it's over, this is going to touch all of us at some point, whether it's someone we know personally or legends we wished we knew personally. But rest assured, at some point, it will be over.
Okay, folks, let's lighten up a little tonight with this free-form show. I'm going to roll the roundtable. Forrest, get ready. I think Sarah left some outtakes in it.
Oh, boy.
Okay. Thanks,
Okay.
good. Everyone ready? You ready, Forrest?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So here we go. 5, 4. Everyone say it. Everyone
Okay.
say the numbers together.
All right.
5,
4,
3, 2, 1. God.
That's
Those
beautiful.
are the most spaced out claps of all time, but hopefully that'll give her something.
You know, there's a
I'm going to put a
delay.
marker on mine here.
There's a delay. It's fine.
Yeah.
Okay. So, I'd like to welcome everybody to the first Fortean Buzzkills and Rich Roundtable, number 1, with Astonishing Legends here. We wanted to do a little bit of a lighter show this week since everything else in the world is dark, including our show last week. So we wanted to get together and talk about some current paranormal topical events and also what's going on in our own personal lives. That's the driest introduction of all time, so I'm going to be quiet now. And also, we're recording video of this on Zoom, which we will make available at least on Patreon. I'm not sure if I'm going to put it anywhere else, but we'll see.
I doubt even that after we actually review it later.
Yeah.
Come on, who doesn't want this?
Well, you'd be surprised. Yeah.
At this point, we would definitely like to welcome back Rich Hatem and Rob Kristoffersen, who have both been on the show before. You guys, everybody knows Rich is the screenwriter, has been on the show a bunch. He adapted the Mothman Prophecies. He also writes for Titans. He is best friends with Bender. And we'd also like to welcome back Rob Kristoffersen from Our Strange Skies, among other shows. Both of these guys very prolific in many ways, podcasts and otherwise. So hello, guys. Welcome back to the show.
Thanks, man. How's it going?
It's going good. Bon Jovi has been standing over my shoulder for a while now, which those of you who don't have video can't see. I just wanted to make it a little more. I'm still working on designing a set.
You're on radio, essentially, so your descriptions of visual things most people won't know what you're talking about.
The very first thing I said was those of you that are listening won't be able to see this.
Except that you said that Rich was a friend of Bender and then didn't explain that.
I don't have to.
That can just be a weird thing.
Yeah,
that
it could just
people
be
have
a
to
weird
wonder
thing.
about.
Exactly.
It could be any Bender. Could be, Albert K. Bender. Could be, any other kind of Bender.
Yeah. I like, there's a couple of Benders in my life.
All right, then.
But let me help you out here. Let me draw a picture for you. A few minutes before we started recording, Rob and I were remarking on how scary it was in Scott's visual square. There's so much room behind him. It just has that classic horror movie thing where it's like, something scary is going to happen behind him. There shouldn't be that much space. And so he went and set up a Bon Jovi poster. And I got to say, it has made the room a little scarier.
It is, yeah.
Scott, why don't you explain what that poster is? It's not just from your childhood.
No, it's not. Although
it's from
I
its
did like
adulthood.
Bon Jovi. This is actually a prop from a sketch that my wife wrote while she was at Saturday Night Live. She wrote the sketch that I think it was Amy Poehler was playing a little kid in her bedroom. And she has this poster, this very poster or a copy of it on her closet door. And he steps out of it because he was hosting that week. So the weird thing is, and for those of you that can't see this, you won't know this, but he's wearing one of his outfits from the Slippery When Wet tour.
Yeah.
He actually brought that. This is not vintage Bon Jovi. This is Bon Jovi that came back many years later to Saturday Night Live, and he dug this outfit out of his wardrobe and wore it for the poster and for the sketch.
So was he pretty good? Was he like a nice guy?
He was. They loved him. The only thing that I remember happening that was particularly funny, and I hope it's okay for me to talk about this, because they were the musical act as well, and was that him and Richie, they had some kind of argument, and as a result, I think didn't play their second song or something. I can't remember what happened.
Well, I mean, that's why Richie's not in the band anymore. So.
Yeah, so that was a long time ago. Yeah, so I just wanted to get a little color in this room. I have some ideas for a set that I'm going to work on. But, So, yeah, let's talk about your room. Rich, where are you in your home here?
I'm in my office. And so the way I'm set up now would be me sitting at my desk. So if I was working, I would be in exactly this position typing. I'm usually not working in my home office, but I'm usually at my office, which I also try to set up in a cool way. But here, I'll turn my computer around so you can see what I'm looking at. Okay.
Oh, yeah. It's that's an impressive bookcase. See, that's what I need. I've got Bon Jovi. You have actual books over there. No, those aren't books. Why are those all the same size?
Yeah.
They're
All
size.
books. Yeah.
Yeah, he reads.
Are you buying books that are all exactly the same size?
Well, no, but some of it, like you were looking at like my Lee Child first editions and James Lee Burke. And,
cool.
And I also wrap all my first editions in that Mylar. They're called Broad Art book covers. But it'll like, if you look at it, it looks like I live in a bookstore because they're all covered in that plastic.
Yeah, that's what I was
Well,
thinking.
where's your People's Choice Award, though, Rich?
I don't have a People's Choice Award. I don't have any awards. I've literally
You didn't get a Webby?
No awards. No, I got nothing.
See, you're not one of the usual folks that have the Emmy on the shelf in the background so you can see it.
No.
And the Cable Ace Award.
If I did, I would wear it like around my neck, like a giant medallion. And it would be with me always.
We entered, was that the Webbies? We entered this year for the first time, and it's like it's promptly canceled. I mean, they're still doing it, but like no one's going anywhere
for
now.
Podcasts?
Yeah, for podcasting. And
Wouldn't that
I've
be
been
the
meaning
one
to do it for a couple of years,
Yeah.
but you have to fill things out and send things in, including money. And I was just like, okay, we'll do that this year. And now coronavirus.
Well,
So-
isn't that the one award show that you could do remotely out of?
Yeah, it does seem that way,
It does
doesn't
not
it?
really need a ceremony in an auditorium.
Maybe not.
Podcasters, I mean, this is like now the golden moment, isn't it?
Well, it depends on what we do with it. We're probably ruining that right now.
We're squandering it, but that's what I like to do.
Before we get into some of the things that we were going to talk about tonight, we're just going to kind of shoot the breeze and take it easy and just try to keep people entertained as best we can. How has the current lockdown affected you guys individually? Rob, how about you go first on that?
It has not changed Rob's life at all. I'm just going to predict, okay?
Yeah, Rich is gonna
Let's see if I'm right.
gonna talk for me. He's 100% correct. It really hasn't changed a lot in my life. I still get up. I go to work every day. I work in a nursing home, so we are essential. We're 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So getting up every day, go to work, come home, be an introvert, because I don't want to talk to people out in the street. That's just the way I am. It's nothing against you personally, but that's me. I go to the grocery store maybe once a week now. I try to limit it to that, but that is my life. How I make podcasts. I'm still going strong with that because I got to have something to do.
Are there any special procedures at the nursing home at work during this crisis?
You have to wear a mask all the time. Doesn't matter where you go, but they could be a little scarce. We're all right now. We got enough supply as it is, but they've kind of just isolated the residents that live there as best they can. You know, they do their best to maintain social distancing, and we're taking all the necessary precautions to try and prevent this virus from coming in the building.
Sure.
Rob, have you asked them, is it okay if you wear a Halloween mask?
I've tried, and I guess the CDC does not recommend Halloween masks. I'm going to write an effusive letter campaign when this whole thing is over. We're going to get that changed.
It's certainly not your Grim Reaper outfit.
No. I do have a Where's Waldo costume somewhere lying around.
I can just picture Rob walking into a room full of the elderly with the Jason hockey mask on. You know?
I used to have one.
One thing with both Rob and Rich is that in light of people doing a lot more listening now to podcasts, both of you have been on a lot of other people's shows already as guests.
Mm-hmm.
Rob, what have you been on?
I had planned to take the month of March off because I had just overworked myself, and then this virus hit, and I was like, no, I got to do something. I can't just sit back and do nothing. So before I decided that, I ended up appearing on the podcast based on a true story to talk about the first season of Project Blue Book, which is, it's a fun show on the History Channel. I've been on Chris Williamson's Me and My Friends show. We got to talk about UFOs and all sorts of fun stuff. I've been on a few different pods, so not going too crazy. I got to talk to some people.
Remotely anyway.
Yeah.
What was your experience like at Project Blue Book for the TV show, right?
It was fun because I basically, brought to the table these the real incidents that these episodes were based on, and some of them are really interesting, some of them are obscure. There was one involving this Florida Scoutmaster that ended up having this really intense UFO incident down in the Florida Everglades, and it became this big tizzy at Project Blue Book there for a second, and to downplay it, Edward Ruppelt at the time basically just said that this guy was the greatest hoaxer ever. So
that's always your go-to.
Yeah, it's in the back pocket.
Rob, are you like an advisor on the show, or?
No, I was just doing research to talk about the show. I have no affiliation with the show. But if they want to get in touch, I am well versed about the cases that our UFO dad, J. Allen Hynek, was involved in. So they can reach out. OurStrangeSkies@gmail.com. Just hit me up.
Best source there is out there.
So right before Titan started up, when that show was getting going, I made a big effort to be the showrunner. So I went in, I had a number of meetings, I brought all my UFO books. I'm like, this would be great. It was one of the few things I've ever really went out for, like, oh, I want to do this. I really want to do it. And then the Titans job came up, and it looked like they weren't going to make a decision on Blue Book for a little while. And then I was like, oh, I better just, this probably ain't going to happen. So then I went on Titans in July, and then probably around Labor Day, they found someone to run the show, and now they're doing it. So that's one of those weird things that, and this happens every once in a while, where it's like, oh, that's the road not taken. And so I look at that show, and I haven't watched any episodes yet, because I'm like, oh, I don't know. I'm going to get too emotionally involved with like, oh, wait, I would have done it differently. Why are they doing it like this? No. And I'm like, nah, it's got to live and let live.
It's like hearing stories about the person you were interested in dating someone else. Like, right. What do you mean they went to a tropical vacation? That could have been me. Well, Forrest, I just received an urgent message from the creators of Best Fiends. Oh, really? Yes. They're asking you to take a break from play because they can't create levels fast enough to keep up with you. Uh-huh. Well, I doubt that seriously, but okay, take your best shot. What can I say? It's not my fault. Best Fiends is just that much fun. And really, what a better time to be playing than when you're doing your part to maintain social distancing. Seriously, what level are you on now?
You mean as of this morning?
Yeah, you know what? Never mind. I don't even want to know. I will say this.
Okay.
I've made pretty good progress over the last couple of weeks. It's kept me from cabin fever to some degree, and you can just do it a little at a time if that's your pace.
Well, that's good. I stay engaged because the game gets more challenging as you go along. It becomes much more strategy-based gameplay, if you know what I'm saying. Like which fiends to use for specific challenges, how to use their special powers for maximum damage, things like that. And with all the sharp graphics, funny sound effects, and of course all of the explosions, it really makes for a viscerally satisfying experience.
Forrest and I recommend that you, our listeners, check out Best Fiends. It's great for taking a break and grabbing some me time, like a little oasis of fun you can enjoy anywhere, anytime.
Absolutely. There are countless fun challenges, puzzles, battles, and tons of cute characters to collect along the way.
And if anyone would know, it's Forrest.
That I would. Well, Best Fiends has thousands of levels already, with new levels, events, and characters added every month. It's hours of fun right at your fingertips, and you can even play offline.
With over 100 million downloads and tons of 5-star reviews, Best Fiends is a must-play. Download Best Fiends free on the Apple App Store or Google Play.
That's friends without the R. Best Fiends.
Hi, this is Adam from Hinckley, Illinois. When I get some quiet time after putting my kids to bed, I listen to Astonishing Legends. Let's get back to the show.
So, Rich, what's going on with Titans now? Are you guys are in production right now, or what's going on there?
Okay, so the schedule was the first day of production for season 3 was going to be tomorrow.
Actually, before you do this, for listeners who don't know what Titans is, why don't you give a brief overview of the show?
Titans is a live-action, big-budget superhero show on DC Universe and Netflix. So in America, it's on DC Universe. You have to subscribe. And everywhere else, it's on Netflix. And then eventually, it'll be available on Netflix in America. But it's a really cool, really beautiful, fun, exciting, interesting show that we are now working on season 3. And we've been writing and sort of in the story prep portion of the show for the last couple of months. And we were supposed to start filming in Toronto tomorrow. And then 2 weeks ago, of course, that all changed and they hit the pause button. Now it looks like it's going to be at least a few months before we start filming. Because when you're filming something, there's, you've got a whole crew. You've got 100, 200 people all standing around. You've got people in meetings. It's very, social distancing would never work.
Right.
But production on all of your favorite shows is shut down now. Production on movies, my friend.
Every show, every movie, everything that's live action is shut down.
Everything is live action because they all require groups of people in the same environment.
Right. But one thing that does work is animation. And I just saw another story coming out of Hollywood that shows like Family Guy and The Simpsons are still going, as well as Scott's wife's Bless the Hearts on Fox.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. She's in full tilt production, working on Zoom, just like we are now daily with her writer's room and doing edits on Zoom and all that stuff. I'm just glad she's here with me on the East Coast. We got her out of LA pretty much at the last possible moment. So we're sequestered together as opposed to spread out across the country. But yeah, her show is business as usual. And with her being on the East Coast now and the bulk of everyone else being on the West Coast, her days are centered around late starts and late evenings, which is, but at least she's working. Everybody's working in there. I think they're all glad to keep going, just like we are in the podcasting world. And
well, what is she? How does the room? I know my room experience, but I'm wondering about a comedy room. Is she finding it more difficult than usual?
Yeah, it's definitely, there's a different dynamic. Obviously, as you know, Rich, from being in a writer's room, it's all about the atmosphere in the room and what mood people are in, because everyone is their own audience. All these people have in the past, they've performed in front of live audiences and they feed off that. That's what makes the comedy work. So when you're all split up and you're in these little cubes, it is different. But, it seems to still be working. I'm in the other end of the house recording with Forrest. Usually we're running 2 Zoom conferences at the same time a lot of the time. And I hear them all laughing and they seem to be getting it done, which is strange. I think a lot of them, they're probably just maniacally laughing because they're so freaked out and are glad at least that they're home where they're safe for one thing or another. Because I think the last day they went in the office, they were like, why are we here? It's a bunch of comedy writers. So we got to get out of here.
The experience of doing the writer's room on Zoom, for me at least, is we do get work done. So stuff does get accomplished and we're meeting every day. And creating material and then reviewing that material, but working as a room to break new stories. But it is exhausting because it's not, you don't get the energy really in the same way of being in a room with people. At least I don't.
No, and I'm sure she doesn't either.
It's weird. It's like we've talked about the fact that at the end of the day, and we're only going 4, sometimes 5 hours, but usually 4 hours, we're exhausted. I mean, like burned out and physically tired in a way I never was at work when we were meeting in Santa Monica, because it was like, oh, I'm just hanging out with friends all day. But it's something is more concentrated when you're on Zoom. It's like, okay, we're showing up for a meeting and you can see yourself and you can see the other people, but it's like, okay, well, this is a meeting. We need to get something done. And so joking goes way down. I don't know. It's tough.
Yeah.
No, it's interesting because that is the production, the actual physical creation of something that is not yet the finished product. You're coming up with ideas. That all takes collaboration and riffing off each other and bouncing ideas off one another. And so that can be done. It's a little different, I would say, because as now people know, Scott has been on the East Coast. I'm on the West Coast. And what we do when we finally get together in the studio or used to is the finished product. What ends up on mic is what's going out in the air with a lot of heavy editing because we fumble so much, Scott and I do. But that's it. So there's a dynamic there because people ask this a lot. How is it when you're recording remotely between the two of you? Well, I think it's essential, or it really helps for me to see Scott. So that's why we use Zoom. Because, yeah, you do get facial cues, some hand signals. Scott's making the moose antlers with his hands right now.
That's not his face.
Oof, yeah. Well, there's all that too, over video, Skype and Zoom. But you also have some kind of conversational dynamic when you're face-to-face with people. And especially when Rich was over here and we did Orfeo Angelucci and some of the other topics we've covered, there is a conversational dynamic that only happens when you're face to face with people and near them. Yeah. So there's a little bit of a filter between that. So we're able to do that. But people ask me all the time is it better to be in person? And I think, you lose a tiny bit, but you can still get it done.
I did want to say we've been getting a lot of inquiries from people, podcasters especially, who hadn't had to do distance recording before or trying to get into the game now, which because a lot of people are listening and a lot of people are home where they could be recording. And we're getting tech questions. And I just wanted to quickly say there's a lot of different ways to solve all these problems, way more now than when we started. There's a lot more software now that's geared towards podcasters. One of the best ones, probably if you're just starting out with distance recording, and Rob, you can even speak to this more than we do, is Zencastr, Zencastr. My first experience with it was a couple years ago. I just used it to record a friend just to make it easier on his end, who was a guest on the show. A few months ago, I was a guest on America's Next Top Podcaster, this podcast that these guys do. It was a lot of fun as a reality competition show. And they recorded like 10 of us at once with Zencastr. It worked really well. And we're using it now to record Rich because he's technically inept. So that is good.
Mostly technically.
Well, but you use it a lot, right, Rob?
Yeah, I've used it a fair amount when, I'm interviewing someone that generally doesn't have a setup of their own. I'll use that. A lot of the times it's easier as long as you have great internet and as long as you stay on it long enough to make sure that everything buffers again. I also use a program on Skype too,
right,
which I used to record with Rich yesterday.
Yeah. We record with Pro Tools, which is overkill really for podcasting. The only reason we use it is because we used to edit video and it's more familiar to us. And then to connect our audio at broadcast quality, we use a program called Source Connect, which is what voiceover artists and all these guys use. But it's kind of high end. It's also overkill, but we like it because it's stable and gives you a direct connection to the other end.
I want to get something not super expensive, but because I end up going on your show and Rob's show and other shows, like a microphone or whatever a setup would be that would allow me to sound like I'm right there with you.
I know that would be great.
What's the recommendation? Because I'm probably going to just order it today.
Well, the trickiest thing with you, Rich, and this is the case with a lot of people, is that you have a very stripped down computer. So it's portless, really. It has no ports on it, which makes it a little more difficult.
But it's got the audio. It's got that little audio jack.
It does.
But like what I was saying to Rob was I was thinking of there's got to be a USB port, like adapter that goes into an audio jack. So I can then take whatever the microphone with the USB, plug it into the thing, plug that into the thing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, because you have the 3-ring headphone jack, which Apple has, which allows you 2 stereo channels to listen and then also a microphone channel. And you're wearing an Apple headset now, which is plugged into your computer, right?
Yes.
So yeah, you can probably get higher end versions of that kind of headset, which might be your best bet, really. And then the more money you spend, a lot of times the better they sound, especially if it's like a professional conferencing headset that people who work from home all the time might use, like in customer service or something. That probably would be one of your best bets.
But just with a normal audio jack like I've got.
Yeah, I don't know if there's USB adapters that work. Like my father, for example, he's a headhunter. He helps people find jobs, specifically in engineering, and he has this big, crazy headset. But when I talk to him, it sounds amazing. But it's like wearing a pilot's headset in an airplane, but it sounds really, really good. The over-the-ear cans, like Forrest and Rob are wearing right now, that's good because that keeps the incoming sound from bleeding into your microphone, which can also be a problem. When somebody's talking loud, it comes out and it goes into the can like that. So I have in-ear monitors, which I just got, that close that sound out too.
Can you just like send me a link for like a headset? Or, I mean, like when you say like high end, like, are you talking like more than $100 or less than $100?
No, I think they're probably in probably between 100 and 200 range is what I'm guessing for a really good sounding one, I would guess. I haven't looked in a while.
And I'm happy to spend that because, I mean, with what you guys pay me when I come on, I mean, that's...
Listen, I swear to you, I mailed that check a few weeks ago. I don't know why it's not there yet. Let's just give it a few more weeks. And if it doesn't come...
But that check, that's for the first episode we did, right?
Yeah, a couple years ago.
Right, okay, so that one's good. And then the others...
But I did mail it.
But the other ones will come sort of like every 6 months, but not only a portion
they're
of the
staggered.
payment. Right, that's for my taxes because
we just want it to be easier for you.
Influx of money to the degree that you guys are paying me,
it could change
my
your tax
taxes
bracket.
You're going to have to launder that.
Well, we're looking into a off-the-books dark web cryptocurrency to get set up.
Oh, right. No, because I would prefer Bitcoin.
Yeah.
We'll
but not American Bitcoin. I want like, some sort of maybe Japanese Bitcoin.
All right, we'll see what we can do.
Well, here's one thing, a solution that what I did at home is there are a lot of USB mics that are pretty good. Then that means that you can plug the mic directly into a USB port, which I think on the new MacBooks, you'll have a port that comes out that will pigtail, or you can buy an adapter that lets you have several different devices plugged into that one USB or Lightning connector. And what you can do is just get a separate set of headphones or what you're using now and have a separate mic situation, which is what I do at home. So I think it's worth explaining because a lot of people do ask us what we're using. We have Shure SM7Bs, and those are more of a studio professional mic, which you cannot directly plug into a USB socket. You need to go through a digital audio interface. And we use the Duet by Apogee, which then translates that signal into a digital signal that can be recorded by your laptop.
Yes.
That's another solution there. If people, you don't have to get a headset. That's an all-in-one solution if people are thinking about that. But also, I've heard a bunch of podcasts when we were starting out that use gamer headsets, and it just doesn't cut it for me. And that was one of the first paranormal podcasts I'd ever listened to. It was two guys. And they just sounded like, they were 12-year-olds from the Netherlands yelling at you on a video game. So there are pretty decent mics that are around $100 to $200 that will directly plug in. Yeah, that's
like a Yeti or somebody like that. If you have USB ports, unlike Rich, if you have USB ports, there's a lot more choices to make.
Okay.
But Rich, I was being specific to yours, which is you have the headphone jack,
Well, which is better though? I mean, should I just go get a thing with the USB port adapter and then just do that?
I think a mic.
Forrest is like, I want you to spend like $1,200.
No. Like I just said, there's a lot of good brands out there. Just read the reviews.
All right.
Google reviews. But there's a lot of good solutions, I guess, for what I'm saying for people out there who don't know how to get started. And Yeti is a good one. That's a decent, ready to plug in mic. And then you'll need some kind of recording program on your computer.
The important thing to remember in your case where you only have the mini jack is that you have to convert the signal from digital to analog because the mini jack is an analog signal going into your computer and a USB microphone is a digital signal. And that's why we have boxes because the boxes are doing the job of...
and Rich is pretending to...
Yeah, you're right. Yeah. Let's go. Clear? All right, let's move on.
Yes.
We're going to rely on Rich to tell us when the show is getting super boring.
He's got to do his whole shebang thing in 30 minutes. Wait,
I'm not doing any shebang. How dare you with my
your usual show. It's one of the first terms, which was funny, is that when we had Rich out for dinner, and I think it was Scott's wife was like, "Hey, I'm a 30-minute person. You're an hour person." So that's the length of the show is that it's a lot different than how you write, and because you have to accomplish some goals by the end of 22 written minutes or whatever it is for a half-hour show, as opposed to we have a whole hour here. And if you look at us, it's like we try to keep it under 3 hours. So
well, that's a question, Rich. Actually, for Titans, you guys, since you're streaming, do you have to worry about like later if it's syndicated, like commercial breaks? Do you make each episode a certain length? Because I can't remember.
You'd think I would know the answer to that question. And at first we thought we could go long. But then we started hearing, no, we're trying to keep it down to the normal 41, 42 minutes.
Yeah, 42. That's what I thought it was for an hour.
But then we've done episodes that are shorter, then we've done episodes that are slightly longer. So with us, it really comes down to, it comes down to cost, because to do a 59-minute episode where all 59 of those minutes feels justified, then that's a very long script. That's more shooting days. That's more... a lot of money. That's just more money. It's like we're going to need more special effects and CG effects, and then suddenly the budget for that episode is actually bigger. You can't. It's not just like, no, just put in more scenes or just make the scenes longer, because there's a consideration about the length of any given scene. You can't just take a scene that ideally should be about 20 seconds and make it a minute and 20 seconds, because you're going to feel that extra minute, and it's going to affect the quality of that particular episode. So the answer is, we're kind of a normal show. You're going to get about 40 to 45 minutes of filmed entertainment with every episode of Titans.
That's why I'm glad I make a podcast by myself. This is all way too involved for someone like me. I'm just like having conversations with myself. Hey, buddy, go read this book, take some notes, write this out, go record it, edit it, put it out. I mean, it's that simple.
Yeah, that is the luxury of podcasting, is that you, and I think why people enjoy it, because there aren't any restrictions placed on the length or what's talked about other than the person producing the podcast.
And, sometimes if you've got a 63-second piece of film, you need 16 and a half hours to discuss it, to decide if it's legit or if it was a guy in a costume, So...
Well, let's get to that.
Yeah, I'm looking at your outline here. This is it's an impressive 3/4 of a page, and I don't have much I can say because I didn't get to really prepare at all for this today because I was busy trying to get the new computer to work.
He's been all technical. So what we have here, and this is a beat down reaction because Scott would yell at me. It's like, this outline is 60 pages long. What are you doing? It's like, well, that's 2 episodes for one thing, and it's just everything you need to say. So just say what's on the page. But here we have 2 pages, and it's just each of our names and one item to talk about each, because we didn't really plan ahead. But there are some things that are happening in the news in the world of Fortean endeavors and interests.
Since we're doing that, let's talk about the name of our little impromptu group, which is really just assigned to a Twitter DM group that the 4 of us are in. It's called the Fortean Buzzkills and Rich. I would like to know, I can't quite remember how this name came around, but I think we should explain it. Well, let's start by just reminding listeners who Charles Hoy Fort was. You want to take that, Rich, or...
Yeah, in the late teens and early 20s of the previous century, he wrote a series of books beginning with the Book of the Damned, where he collected all these little bits and pieces of information, little news stories from around the country and the world that referred to unexplained phenomenon, which was not even a term at that point. But basically, these were things that happened that don't seem to fit into any box in your science drawers, if you will. And he referred to them, these little bits of information, as the damned, because these were things that science couldn't explain, like when fish fall from the sky, or things that we recognize as reports of strange animals, ghosts, UFOs, things like that. And philosophically, he was making the point that if you're going to study physical phenomenon, which is what materialist scientific research is all about, then you can't just exclude a bunch of stuff because it either A, seems to refer to some kind of paranormal phenomenon, which is the enemy of science, or you just can't explain it yet. So his argument was, well, there's got to be a place for this stuff, and if science rejects it, then I'll accept it and I'll publish books about it. And of course, the reaction was science lost their and said, this is all garbage and crazy, and this Fort guy is a crank. And so then for the last 100 years, people like you guys and me and a bunch of others have gone, oh, that's really interesting. Okay, so there's something in between traditional organized religion and traditional materialist science. There's all that stuff in the middle that hasn't been explained yet, and therefore there's a lot of podcasts.
Right, and so they call that Fortean, and it named for him, right?
Yeah.
So how do we get to the buzzkill part?
You guys are a bunch of buzzkills.
So I'll recount this because I remember the exact conversation. One thing that Forrest has brought up on many episodes of Astonishing Legends, and I listened back to the Delphos Ring episode, and you brought it up on there. It's the story that was largely populated in like the 1960s and 70s that Alexander the Great had encounters with UFOs, which is not true. It's just not true at all. And
well, one second.
Oh, here we go.
The ones that are reported. So this is my point, is that you don't know what he experienced, but these are the one experiences that get brought up all the time. The gleaming silver shields at the Battle of Tyre.
Right.
And
right.
What's the other one, Rob? The just being buzzed. I think his column of troops being buzzed.
His army, was allegedly buzzed while they were going somewhere.
And that's the gleaming silver shields incident.
Yeah,
yes.
And it was mostly like Frank Edwards that was promoting this theory in his books and stuff like that. And he promoted a lot of things that were not true. There's a really strange cattle mutilation story from 1897 involving this guy named Alexander Hamilton that is not true because the guy was basically in what they called a liars club back then. They just made up stories and they told them to each other. This was around the time of the mystery airship sightings of the 1896, 1897 stuff. But in the chat, I was bringing it up because I was reading this article on Open Minds TV about how this was mostly populated by, these UFO researchers and stuff. And I boldface said that it's not true. And then Rich had the audacity to say, man, you're just a bunch of Fortean buzzkills.
Exactly. No, that story was a pretty good article too. There was an Italian author who was, I wouldn't say Gray Barker, because everyone says like, well, and that's the problem, is that you see somebody who has admitted to some hoaxes or some chicanery for fun, and then everybody points to that case. There you go. Everything's made up. It's always somebody like that. But in this case, it was an author who embellished quite a bit. And I believe that was the first instance in a book from the late 1800s.
Actually, I think it was in some obscure book. I don't remember exactly which it was.
But somebody found that and then locked onto it. And then Scott and I have talked about this phenomenon quite a bit, is that somebody finds one story and it keeps getting passed on and on and on. And then it finds its own place in its own, it becomes its own story tulpa.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there's another story that Frank Edwards published in one of his books about a guy who literally disappeared in front of his family in his front yard. And it's not true. It's just, it's an interesting story, but it's not true.
But how dare you point that out?
Yeah, so you're the buzzkill in this situation. So
I'm the buzzkill. I just want to point out right now, in terms of all three of us, I've had more personal experiences than all of you put together.
That's always the way it is. That's always the way it turns out.
That's what I love about it, though, because that lends some credence to the stuff that is not true. When you say it's not true, I hope that somehow people, because we've come and done the episodes on certain stories, and we've been like, you know what, I can't figure this one out. On the other ones, when we think we can figure it out, we call it out. And that's the whole premise of what we're all doing here, except for Rich, who wants us to believe everything he says.
Yeah, exactly.
Hey, look, that is true. But, we figure, hey, look, you guys figured out Roanoke. Rob and I figured out alien abductions. Certain things do have conclusive answers that we all now come to accept.
That's true. All right. Well, so where are we starting tonight? What are we going to hear now that we're 41 minutes into this session?
Well, let's see here. I think something that happened yesterday that I guess we can talk about, and I'm not sure if anyone else here saw it. Well, Jeremy Corbell had I guess it was kind of a live stream of an update, which connects to, just serendipitously, I had watched finally his documentary, Hunt for the Skinwalker. Pretty well done documentary. I found it very entertaining and had a lot of the famous stories and, of course, a lot of the interviews with the main players, Colonel Needham, I think.
who ran the operations there, Colin Kelleher, who was one of the main scientists operating at the ranch. And so I'll appreciate a documentary that gets a lot of eyewitness interviews, or at least interviews with the original people, because whether you believe it or not, those are the people that are involved in the story and are the main players and characters. So it was pretty well done. But he has George Knapp, the investigative paranormal investigator journalist out of Las Vegas, who a lot of you may have known, and it wrote the seminal Skinwalker book with Colin Kelleher. That is Hunt for the Skinwalker? No, I Rob, what is the name of that?
Yeah, Hunt for the Skinwalker.
Okay. Yeah, in the documentary, he interviews George Knapp at his TV station where he works usually. And he talks a lot about the organizations, the acronym organizations, ATIP, AATIP, the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, and BASS, the Bigelow Aerospace Advanced Space Studies Program, and NIDS, and all the things that we've talked about. But this YouTube streaming yesterday looked like to me the extended version of that interview. So it was interesting, and there was a few not major revelations, but some interesting things that were kind of revealed to be known that weren't previously known. And I think overall, if people don't know, we've covered Skinwalker Ranch, of course, a couple years ago now, and it's one of our most popular series. I don't think a lot of people make the connection between what came out as a revelation about the ATIP program and the New York Times article and Commander David Fravor and the UFO sightings by the USS Nimitz and all these Navy encounters, that there is a connection seemingly now to Skinwalker Ranch. I don't think a lot of people will have known that there is some kind of connection there.
Yeah, I don't think a lot of people, it's like when they published the 2017 article, Glowing Auras and Black Money, they had a slight allusion to it in the article, but they didn't really go into depth in it. And I remember, Scott, you were kind of upset about it because it didn't really, shine any light. You're like, well, was Harry Reid, rolling up to Skinwalker Ranch and hanging out for a weekend and stuff like that. And what the interview basically comes out and says is that there's a different program. It's not ATIP. ATIP really looked at the military side of these UFO encounters that pilots and other kind of military personnel were having. And there is this unnamed other organization within the government that spearheaded the kind of civilian side of it. And one of the things that has been alluded to is that there was a call for contractors to apply to be a part of a program. And Bigelow Aerospace, I believe, was the only one that applied for it. And he got it. So essentially, at a certain point, Bigelow Aerospace, it's believed that they were working with the Defense Intelligence Agency, and they were studying the ranch at a certain point, early in 2009. Now, there was a really great long article on popular mechanics that came out in February. It's by a writer named Tim McMillan, and it goes into the nitty-gritty of like everything that has come out since 2017 in that article and where we are now. And one of the things that it alludes to is a report. It's called the 10-month report, released in 2009. And it has all these revelations of things that Bigelow Aerospace wanted to do, were requesting, and things that they were in the process of already studying. Some of those things included requesting Project Blue Book files that had not been released. Some of it was wanting to set up almost like a medical task force to study people who had had close encounters with UFOs that had negative health effects or some kind of health effects. And it alludes to Skinwalker Ranch being a possible site for like a laboratory for studying the phenomenon for technological uses. So that's come out recently. Like Skinwalker Ranch is in the news again. It's got a show on the History Channel that by the time this comes out is out already. The current owner, who had been keeping his name hidden for a long time, has now come out. His name is Brandon Fugel, and he's a Utah-based real estate mogul. He also invests in tech and stuff like that. There's a great article from MJ Banias over at Vice Motherboard. He ended up going out there. He, was able to interview the scientist that is working there now, because they're still using it essentially as a scientific study area. And there is one guy, and I think one of the most startling things that he mentions in the article is that the ranch itself has a kind of mood. So, like, you can kind of sense what mood it is in when you're there.
Yeah, that was interesting. He described it as like a beehive, that if
Yeah.
you leave it alone, it
Mhm.
does its thing. You might get harassed by a few bees here and there, but mostly it sticks to itself. If you kick the beehive, of course, you kick up the activity. And from the documentary by Jeremy Corbell, George Knapp claims it's especially digging. If you disturb anything on the ranch, but
Mhm.
especially digging in the ground will usually cause some activity to occur. They tried that on the documentary, and not much happened, of course, on camera.
Mm.
But yeah, that's an interesting thing, and an interesting concept is that it doesn't really like disturbance and other things like strangers coming onto the place. It's like an organism of sorts, or a stray dog. If you're nice to it, you feed it, it gets used to you. There's some harmony there. If it's a stranger who upsets it, then you're going to get some barking and the activity kicks up. But yeah, it was totally interesting. And also in the documentary, towards the end of it, you see a man whose face you don't see. He's shot from the neck down, wearing all black, and he's kind of billed as the mysterious new owner of Skinwalker, and his voice has been pitch shifted down so it's disguised, and I believe that is Brandon Fugel.
Yeah, that is. MJ Banias also did an interview with him. There's another post on Vice Motherboard with him, and they've got a picture of him on the top. And yeah, he's just wearing like leather jacket, all that fun stuff. I think the most startling thing that has come from the Corbell documentary and everything that's come out about the ranch is that they allude to the fact that when researchers went on the ranch, when they left, they often took paranormal activity home with them. And that's terrifying.
Yeah, and that's why we find the ranch, and I think they do too as well. It's not just one thing. It is the kitchen sink of paranormal activity. So it's everything you can think of all in one place. And I think that's what makes it one of the most unique or the unique place known, certainly now, that is accessible, where you can study all different manner of phenomena. And
Well-
it includes UFOs and such, but like that, what you just described, like so many ghost hunters describe that scenario as well, where you go into a place, you disturb it. If you don't take the proper spiritual precautions, stuff can follow you home.
Stuff can follow you home if you don't take precautions, or if you do take precautions too. I mean,
Certainly at the grocery store nowadays as well. Yes.
yeah.
Yeah, what are we still talking about Skinwalker Ranch, or have we now moved on? I'm really glad that people are studying Skinwalker Ranch, and I find it fascinating that these big business guys and official government groups are moving in there. My prediction is that what they hope to do is conclusively prove the existence of a particular phenomenon and explain it. My prediction is B, that's not going to happen because I don't think that's the way this works. I think what's going to happen is what is happening. A bunch of people are going to go there. They're not going to get any evidence, but people are going to have subjective experiences both there and afterwards that will change them individually. In other words, what happened to Scott at the Sally house. I honestly believe that all of this stuff boils down to individual investigation and change on an individual level, but not on an institutional level. I think all this stuff boils down to subjective experiences that really affect someone and maybe change the way they think and live.
It kind of alludes to the idea that it's the experiencer, not the experience in those cases, because you're talking about, like, if you're trying to encourage some widespread belief in all of the stuff, it's not going to happen. The only way that it could potentially happen is if this phenomena goes from person to person to person to person to person, and it exposes them to a certain kind of experience or something like that. It's why, by and large, photographic evidence of UFOs is not good evidence most of the time, because especially in the day and age that we live in now, things can be faked very easily. But you show evidence like that to somebody and they're just like, yeah, whatever. I mean, it was a little easier back in, like, say, the 40s and the 50s when, cameras were a little different. But since everybody has one on them now, capturing footage of a UFO is, like, really not a helpful thing. It comes down to the experiencer and them being able to describe what they experienced and in a level of detail that shows you the stuff that sticks out, especially if they're talking about what they're thinking or what they're feeling as they're going through this, because a lot of the times, and I mean, Rich, we've talked about this, is that they're not thinking like what you would normally think somebody would in that kind of situation. So,
well, it's twofold. I'm fascinated that people, when they see a UFO, often because we've heard the stories a million times and it feels so special and weird and scary when we're thinking about it and reading about it and talking about it, because the implications are so weird. But when people experience them, and I forget this all the time, they're experiencing it as something totally real. They're just like, oh, look at that. There's this weird craft. Oh, well, that must be, well, it doesn't feel supernatural to them.
Right.
At the beginning, at least, often. It's like, oh, well, now what's that? Now that's strange. And it's only as they begin to think about it and sort of go, well, wait, it's not making any noise. Oh, that's weird. And then maybe they get a feeling like, oh, it doesn't want me to see it. And then it starts to slowly cross a line into a more of a psychic experience. But the opposite seems to be true in certain ghost and Bigfoot sightings, where there's a huge emotional feeling instantly. With Bigfoot, there often people are like, I was more scared than I have ever been in my life. And it wasn't based on, oh, I think it's a bear that's going to kill me. It's like, there was something wrong about this. This is not a thing that is natural and normal. And it filled me with a level of terror. Same thing with Mothman sightings. I'm always in favor of studying the experiencer more than the phenomenon. The Skinwalker Ranch, we should be talking to the people and what they're experiencing and how they're experiencing it and what it's making them feel and who are these people who have the experiences. To me, that's the gold that is sitting right in front of us. And it's not a photograph or a videotape of a portal opening between dimensions.
One of the things that's curious about this is when you talk about the experiencer and you talk about the nature of the experiences, and specifically when you go back to Skinwalker Ranch, which had a high trickster component to it, and you come back to that idea that the experiences are custom designed for the people who are trying to measure them. And that's a whole nother thing that ties in with quantum physics, which I know people throw around and be like, oh, they when they can't explain something, they talk about quantum physics, which they a lot of people in our genre do that. But the idea of how observing something changes it, that almost seems to come into play with regard to the things that happen at Skinwalker Ranch.
Yeah.
Rich, I think you've read, I don't know if you've read it. I haven't read it. I keep wanting to read it, and I wanted to have a show about it, was that book, The Trickster and the Paranormal.
Oh, yeah. I have read it. Man, it's fascinating, but it's tough. It gets into some weird areas. Like there's weird philosophical, things that I'm not smart enough to really comprehend.
It's interesting to me how all of that stuff ties together. And I just think about the end of Contact, when she has the personal experience that nobody believes because it happens in the, spoiler alert, by the way.
Oh, no, finally Scott spoils something.
It's an old movie.
And that's exactly what I tell him. He's like, you just spoiled Citizen Kane for me.
You spoil stuff that hasn't even been released yet. So anyway, whatever. She gets back. They don't think it happened because there wasn't enough time for what she experienced to happen or what. It's just, and it's really just all about her. And then she's left trying to convince people. And that's the same kind of feeling that I had to a certain extent with the Sally House. Even though I had something on tape, you have to decide whether or not you believe we faked that audio or something like that, which I know we didn't, but there's no way for me to prove that we didn't. So then it's like, you know what? I'm all by myself here, ultimately, or we are, because we were those of us who were in the house together and know that we didn't fake it when that happened. And then at Skinwalker Ranch, it's like these guys are out there with their notebooks and the cameras, and they set up the cameras turn off, the thing happens, the camera turned back on. And so the only thing you get to say is, this definitely happened at this point, but none of the gear worked during that millisecond. And so we have nothing to say, but I personally know that that's how it went down. And so that one person, or the person who was observing it, is the only one that gets to have the experience. And then coming back around to this whole beehive thing or whatever, or that it's an organism, man, I had forgotten about it. Thanks for bringing it all back. 'Cause that place wigs me out.
Of course. Well, that is well talked about in the documentary, the Corbell documentary as well. But I think one thing that's being brought up here that I think is fascinating as far as how you process and register that personal experience is that it's the nature of what you're looking at. I will say it this way. We've said this all the time, and that's the big thing that we get thrown at us. It's like, look, there's no proof for any of this. And I always say, it's like, well, it depends on what you consider proof. There's always been really great examples of ghost photos. Unless it's somebody you know who took it, you're going to probably doubt, like, well, there you go. They're just trying to get attention. And there's always been tons of great UFO shots and footage and all kinds of recordings. And I think it depends on what you're looking at. And I'll explain it this way. If you look up in the sky and you see something that's it's diamond shaped, it's multicolored, it looks like the ice cream cone and Close Encounters of the Third Kind, it's blinking all these different kind of lights, and it zigzags up and down and then takes off at a 90-degree angle. It's like, well, that's nothing that, is commercially known in aviation. That's impossible. We don't have that kind of technology. And that's like, well, that's really weird. That's different than seeing a creature that looks like a kangaroo with a human face on it. And that's one of my favorite descriptions, because I've had close friends describe to me things that they've seen that's so weird. Scott has a friend that we've been trying to work around this, getting this on the show as a description, as an anecdote, the Goblin in the Garden, where somebody sees
that guy's coming on.
Yeah, probably not at this point. But seeing something, it's like, that's not a possum. That's not a kid playing a prank in a Halloween costume. You're seeing something that looks so real. That strikes you so much differently when you talk about the personal experience that you're having with something that's an anomaly. Okay, that's different than seeing lights in the sky. That's like with myself at Waverly, seeing what looked like a guy cross in front of one of our team members there, James A. Willis, and it looks so much like a regular person, it didn't strike me at all. It's just like, I don't even register it. And then it wasn't until I thought later, it's like, well, where did the guy go? He walked into an empty room, which is totally open, and no one ever saw him again. And we looked at the room and he was gone. So, but it didn't really register because he looked so normal.
I think one of the things that I kind of wish investigators of this kind of phenomenon would ask the witnesses is what they think UFOs look like before this incident happened. Like, go back before this, because is this phenomenon able to get into your head and realize what's in there and try to form itself around that? That's one of the most interesting things, because it seems like this phenomenon, whatever it is better at studying us than we are at studying it. It's just a lot more efficient in that way.
I think that's a good point, Rob, because in some instances, maybe a lot of them, it does seem like they are still studying us. And from a lot of UFO encounter reports, it's like they don't quite get it yet. They're still baffled by us. They're still interested. They're still checking us out. And we may be so weirdly foreign to them that people are still having encounters and they're still trying to figure us out. But the idea is that they're still studying us and we are trying to as well, but our vantage point is so much lower. They're on Rich's Mothman scaffolding and he can see up the road 10 miles and we're stuck on the sidewalk and we're just looking up, wondering what's happening.
Oh, Rich, God, that reminds me. I wanted to ask you something that's messing with my noodle here real quick. Yeah. But you had held up a little sign that said, "Let's take a break."
Yeah.
And it was backwards.
So, yeah, I had to write it backwards so that it would read on camera. So I wrote that backwards.
You don't. Because
you mean, are you guys seeing this backwards? Does
this
look backwards?
Okay. I'm glad because I thought there was a glitch in the Matrix, because I can clearly read the Mothman Prophecies poster behind you. It's perfectly written. And so I was going to say, how can that be written normal? And then you hold up a post-it that you wrote and it's backwards.
But to me,
that's backwards.
Oh, wait a second. There's actually a thing I can do here that will undo
your own
mirror
camera or something.
Yeah, no, hang on. Mirror my video. Hold on. Boom. Now I'm seeing myself the way you guys see me.
Yeah, I was concerned that you had written something forwards and somehow when you held it up, it became backwards, because I can read clearly the words behind you the right way. So that was bothering me.
That's a cool trick.
Wait, how does this look? If I hold this up.
I don't want this.
What does it look like?
Red rum.
That's
okay.
fine.
All right. Shall we?
Take a break.
Yes, let's break. With all the uncertainty in the world, feeling safe at home has never been more important. It's why we want to talk to you about Simply Safe Home Security. They're longtime friends of Astonishing Legends, and for good reason.
I take home security very seriously, and I know that Forrest does as well. And no question about it, Simply Safe is a product that I trust and depend on every day to keep my family secure.
Absolutely. I've had my place broken into years ago, and it's a really horrible feeling. And just imagine the feeling if someone did that while you and your family were home, sleeping. I can't put a price on the peace of mind Simply Safe gives me.
Plus, you really can set this up yourself.
And that's even more peace of mind. And yes, you can. Because if Scott can do it, you can do it.
All right, I can't argue with that. I really can't. Seriously, all kidding aside, you don't need to wait for a company technician or some random third-party installer to come out to your house and get this set up and disrupt your home. Simply Safe is easy enough to do it yourself, and it takes just about an hour.
Simply Safe truly has made it easy to get comprehensive protection for your home. Everything you need for about 50 cents a day. And there's no 2-year contract with insane termination fees.
You just order online, set it up, and there you go. Your home, your family, everything is protected 24/7 for a fraction of what you'd expect.
Including emergency dispatch service for break-ins, fire, and so much more.
Forrest and I are not the only fans of Simply Safe. U.S. News & World Report named Simply Safe Best Overall Home Security of 2020.
Scott and I want you to enjoy the same affordable, comprehensive home security we do. So, right now, when you head to simplysafe.com/AL, our listeners will get free shipping and a 60-day risk-free trial.
That's simplysafe.com/AL to make sure they know that our show sent you.
From Simply Safe and all of us here, we're wishing you safety and good health.
I'm Becky Scott, and when I'm not looking out for the Chicago Mothman, I'm listening to Astonishing Legends. Let's get back to the show.
Okay, so we got a couple more stories here. Mine's dumb, so we're cutting it. We're just going to go with the three of you have stories. I think, Forrest, you should tell yours first.
But wait, what was your story about, Scott?
You know what I wanted to talk about, and I feel like I brought him up on the show before, was Clement Vallandigham from Vallandigham, who was the defender who was trying to prove something in court about how a gun couldn't have gone off and it went off in his pocket or something and it killed him in court. I just love that story. So if you, I just wanted to talk about how asinine that was. If you want to look him up, it's Clement Vallandigham, Vallandigham. Here, I'll read the little just quickly.
I'm going to officially change my name to that.
Vallandigham.
Vallandigham died. This is from Wikipedia. All credit to Wikipedia, whatever anonymous person wrote this. Vallandigham died in 1871 in Lebanon, Ohio, at the age of 50 after accidentally shooting himself in the abdomen with a pistol. He was representing a defendant, Thomas McGeehan, in a murder case for killing a man in a barroom brawl in Hamilton, Ohio. Vallandigham attempted to prove the victim, Tom Myers, had in fact accidentally shot himself while drawing his pistol from a pocket while rising from a kneeling position. As Vallandigham conferred with fellow defense attorneys in his hotel room at the Lebanon House, later the Golden Lamb Inn, he showed them how he would demonstrate this to the jury. Selecting a pistol he believed to be unloaded, he put it in his pocket and enacted the events as they might have happened, snagging the loaded gun on his clothing and unintentionally causing it to discharge into his belly. Although he was fatally wounded, Vallandigham's demonstration proved his point, and the defendant, Thomas McGeehan, was acquitted and released from custody, only to be shot to death 4 years later in his saloon.
Oh,
so
right. Well, the guy got 4 years.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
I mean, that's a good attorney. He shot himself to prove the point, I guess.
Yeah.
Didn't that come up in our...
Oh, the Henry Plummer
Yeah,
series?
the Sheriff Henry Plummer. I would have liked to have had it happen in court myself.
Yeah.
Because you're
in
missing out on the big
my memory, it
audience.
had. See, and that's
Yeah.
how legends become legends. Because
I
I
see.
even told it, even when I let it in just now, I told it wrong. But then when I read it, I told the right version. That's the difference with us. We always try to find the right version. All of us, I think, when it comes to telling these stories. Speaking of which, so Forrest, what is your story? You've alluded to this in the past couple episodes, but I don't think you told it on the air yet.
I thought it was a good time maybe now since we're all coming to the table. And it's not... As far as like it's not the big finale type of story, but it is something that happened to me personally that usually never happens.
This wasn't that long ago either, right?
Yeah, this would have
few
been
months
in
ago?
February. First part of it I can actually find because I took a few photos wondering if it would happen again. Here's the setup on this, and again, I think my reaction was I didn't know what to think of it at the time. So at the end of October, a good friend of mine had passed away, and I had known him and worked with him since 1993, 92. And a real character, a real sweetheart of a guy named Paul. And about the time that I knew him or met him, probably a little bit before that, he found out that he had multiple sclerosis. And so over those years, he'd had MS, and he'd always done pretty well. He was pretty mobile up until the last few years, but his mind was always sharp for the most part. I mean, he was a real character, but an artist, a creative director, fine art painter. He was just an all around artist. So we had a memorial for him showcasing all of his art, and that happened in the first part of November. So that had occurred, and then of course the holidays happened, and in February it was always a circle of friends. So his wife and another friend of his who was also a music composer, and his wife, we'd all kind of worked together and had all been friends, and that's the setup. So I've known them quite a long time. So we had Paul's wife there, his widow. We had another friend of Paul's and ours who's a music composer, and his wife, and we were just having a nice dinner at their house. They'd prepared a lovely meal. Of course, after dinner, David had got out a bottle of really nice Suntory Hibiki whiskey, Japanese whiskey, and he set it on the table. And so we all had a small glass, and as they're clearing up the dishes, and I was sitting at the table with Paul's wife, and we were all talking. So those two are who own the house. They're in the kitchen kind of cleaning up and getting ready for us all to kind of sit down and have a little after dinner, a few snacks, and enjoy a finger or two of good whiskey. And I'd already poured myself one. And as we were talking, the topic came up about the memorial and like how it was so fun. It brought all of our working cohorts and friends together after probably, people hadn't worked or seen each other for maybe 15, 20 years. And we all came back, and this would all be in the corporate media arena. So creative directors and artists and videographers and writers and all these people who would come together to work in this, a lot of it having to do with the automotive industry. And a lot of it was technical. So we would produce large stage events and videos, and this would be production back in the mid 90s to the mid 2000s. And we're just talking about the challenges. Like, man, we didn't have all the stuff that we have now today. Like the things that we're doing the show with right now were so far off that we weren't sure. But we could get by with the technical things that we did have, the tools that we did have. But it was a lot more mechanical, more hands-on, and I was just kind of reminiscing, I wish you would say. We were talking about Paul and how he would like to, added a real creative eye to things, and he added his own style, and very artistic guy. And I work with him in the edit bay quite a bit, and just like was, kind of fond memories. Like, man, we used to have to edit on tape, and it was linear. If you made a change at the beginning, you have to change everything out, everything that follows after that. And, but my statement was like, man, I miss working with Paul. And it was, no matter what challenges we had, it always came out looking really good. For 1995 technology, we got it done, and you can look at the tapes today and it still looks great. And so I was in that reminiscing moment. And at that moment, the cork, which had been pushed down into the bottle of whiskey, pops out and falls onto the table. And Paul's wife and I looked at it, and the first thing she said was like, man, Paul's here and he wants a drink. He wants to join in. And I just sat there kind of like a little bit dumbfounded, and just like we're trying to remember, like, okay, our host David, he'd poured whiskeys for us all. I'd finished that. I poured myself another one, and I was the one who put the cork back in. And if you can look up the bottle, it's kind of a nice bottle, heavy glass top with a cork stopper on the bottom of that.
What's the type? What type of whiskey? I know it's Suntory, but which?
Hibiki, Hibiki. They have several. They're all pretty good. That was the particular brand on this one. And so if you look it up, you can see like it's got a heavy glass top. And I was the one who put the cork back in after I finished, but I was probably going to have another one after that, after we all kind of sat down. So I didn't put the cork in all the way, but I put it in far enough, I would say, to keep it closed. Like if it fell over, I'd want, of course, the cork to stay in. And so at that moment, it's like, wait a second, how far did I put the top back in? It was at least a third to a half of the way down. Like you'd have to hold the bottle down to pull the cork out. And my reason for explaining that is that I just thought, like, how did that happen? I could understand if you had the liquor in the fridge or in the freezer and you brought it out and it warmed up to room temperature and the contents, of course, expanded and that caused pressure and it pushed the cork out. That's never happened to me, but I could understand how that would happen. Or if you had taken the bottle from room temperature outside in the sun and the sun's heating it up, the bottle had been always room temperature. There was no change to it. And it had that context and that I might not have thought much about it if it happened on another day and we weren't talking about Paul. But it happened to be at the moment, like, man, I wish Paul was, was around and we were still working together and wouldn't that be fun? And at that moment, that's when it happens. To me, that's the context that gives it meaning or more meaning as if it happened in some other context or some other time. So the top falls out. His wife immediately just feels like, oh yeah, he's here with us. Because again, that would be a dinner that he would have been in attendance with as well. Later that evening, we had gathered in David's home studio to watch a few shows that he had recorded. And we were again talking about Paul. And I think maybe his wife was talking about, like, you all saw that, right? And then at that moment, the lights flicker, the main light that's in the at the top of the ceiling there, but not throughout the house. So it wasn't a power fluctuation, and it wasn't a power fluctuation in that room, even though there's quite a bit of music gear and recording gear turned on and TVs. Like, just that light flickered a little bit. And she goes like, there you go. I didn't really say much. And then towards the end of the evening, and we're talking with David's wife, and we're all kind of standing at the door, and she's seeing us out. We again talked about that incident, and Paul's wife was like, wow, it kind of gives me a good feeling. Like, he's here. Like, he's kind of, it's at a dinner that he would have liked to have been at. He would have certainly liked to have had a glass of whiskey poured for him. And it just like, that was so kind of unusual and strange. And we were just kind of acknowledging that. And at that moment, the light in the living room flickers a little bit, but no other lights in the house, just that one that we were nearest.
So this is a second light flickering.
This is a second. I think it probably flickered a couple of times in the studio when we were talking. Yeah. And then just that one time. And again, I didn't say anything because I also don't like to freak out hosts in their house if they don't buy into this stuff, because if you don't believe it or you do and it freaks you out. I don't like to mention it like, well, there you go. You got a ghost in your house. Good luck with that. Good night. It was just something where Paul's wife had said, well, there you go. It just happened again, like in kind of a way of saying like, well, if you didn't believe the first two times, there it is. We're saying goodbye. So that happened. Yeah. It's like one of the few things where I guess we were all looking for evidence or that personal experience. Like, I didn't feel anything. It wasn't, it was nice memories to think about your friend who had passed away, and something strange did happen, but it was pretty neutral for me in that feeling of like, I'm just thinking like, I guess the cork did fall out. That's unusual. That I couldn't think of any way that would happen naturally with physics on its own. And it had a context to it. So there you go. It's a mild experience to me. And again, not much has ever happened to me, but like, well, there you go. And as far as experience and proof, one of the main things that gets people's attention is a poltergeist type activity where something moves. We're always looking at that. Like, could you make the REM pod go off for us, please? Can you send us an EVP? Can you turn on the child's toy? Because those electronic things are less tangible to us. But when something moves that it wasn't blown by the wind or didn't fall, didn't slide off a table, when something moves on its own, that gets your attention. And that's my story. And that's the rest of the story.
I think it's an interesting story. I mean, even if you could chalk up the electrical stuff, I mean, you could chalk it up to something that's on the same circuit or something like that. But the cork coming out, all right, so in terms of physics, which you mentioned, that maybe with a temperature change or a long period of time or something, or if you had only just barely gotten it in there.
If it was carbonated, you know what I'm saying? If there's a gaseous pressure building up inside the bottle from it being disturbed, but whiskey's pretty inert. So it's just sitting in the bottle. There's no carbonation. We had just opened it. It's not like it's 200 years old and we just cracked the seal and the pressure inside is working its way out. It was kind of unexplainable, but it's very mild. You know what I'm saying? It's just like it didn't spray up into a fountain. The bottle didn't twirl around. The top just kind of fell out onto the table. And, maybe this is also significant. It fell out on the table and then scooted about another half foot to get onto the floor. So it was a little bit more dramatic.
There's a detail you left out.
No, because here's the
that's
thing.
kind of a big detail.
No. Here's what I'm saying as far as like how physics works and what we're expecting to see. It didn't slide off the table. It fell out of the bottle. It bounced a couple of times. And then it kind of rolled off the table, or I didn't even notice it. It kind of made its way off the table. Like I said, if it fell, and these are all the cues of how physics works. Did you look for fishing
strings?
See, that's how I know it wouldn't. Yeah, if we were at the come to the ghost roadside attraction and that happens, or like I was trying to prank Scott when we were at the Monte Vista Hotel by tying fishing line to a rocking chair, which I wish I would have done if I had the time. Then you can kind of expect that. It's like, we're just at a dinner here. Nobody did anything. And
well, look, the incident had meaning because you were talking about someone who had passed on. And then twice later in the evening, when you were talking about that person, something happened that got your attention that's not common. So the meaning of it's pretty clear. But it is funny. It reminds me, Scott, have you ever told the story of what happened in the steakhouse bathroom?
Yes, he has.
Yes, I told that during our 100th episode, Archipalooza series. I told.
Oh, okay, great.
Yes,
yeah, I love that one. I love it especially because I've been to that steakhouse.
Yeah, you went there,
to that
right?
Bathroom. Yeah, like went right there. Like that week, I went there, and it really freaked me out. I kind of waited for something to happen, but then nothing happened.
That was a weird event, and yeah, for those of you that want to hear that story, we did a special for the 100th episode. And Rob, weren't you on it? I can't remember.
Yeah, I was there.
Yeah. We called it Archipalooza. And I think it wound up being 2 episodes. I can't remember which one I told that story in, but yeah,
well, it's
that was
the perfect time to go back, and listen to the episodes you've missed. So if you haven't heard Archipalooza, definitely, because there's a ton of great stories.
The reality is that 90% of us don't brush properly. That means brushing for 2 minutes twice a day and flossing regularly, no matter what brand you use. We just don't do it.
Look, I didn't have good brushing habits. Then I got my Quip, and my brushing habits have improved immensely. It's like night and day.
Yeah, we're all guilty of not following our dentist's recommendations to the letter. Finally, I'm happy to report that my Quip does the job and keeps me on track. And I feel and see the improvements. My gums are looking great. What can I say?
Hashtag Forrest Gums. It's going to be a thing. I can feel it.
No, I don't. No, I don't want it to be a thing.
For those of you who don't know, Quip are the makers of the Quip electric toothbrush. But really, it's more like a total dental care system, right, Forrest?
Yeah, it's not just an electric toothbrush. With their refill plan, every 3 months, Quip delivers a new brush head. So feel free to toss out the old one responsibly. And you get new floss and anti-cavity toothpaste as well. Plus, that includes free shipping.
I really appreciate the floss because it comes pre-measured, so I can use just the right amount. Of course, the big game changer is that the toothbrush uses sonic vibrations with a built-in timer at 30-second intervals, so your habits are always on target. Basically, it tells you when to switch around, right? You get a full, even clean.
The folks at Quip have a saying about dental care. It is simply this, that if you have good habits, you are good. And I couldn't agree more.
Don't wait another minute to get your habits back on track. Join Forrest and I, along with over 3 million healthy mouths, and order Quip today, starting at only $25.
And if you go to getquip.com/legends right now, you'll get your first refill free. That's your first refill free at getquip.com/legends.
Spelled GETQUIP.com/legends.
Quip, the good habits company.
Have you looked at your wireless bill lately? You're probably paying too much. It's 2020. Network coverage is better than ever, no matter your wireless provider. So why pay more for the same service?
That's where Mint Mobile comes in. They can cut your bill down to $15 a month for the same premium coverage. And I know what you're thinking. This is too good to be true. But these guys know what they're doing.
I got to say it first, Forrest and I were both pretty skeptical.
Well, yeah, but Mint Mobile delivered.
Absolutely. It's really that easy to cut your wireless bill down to just $15 a month. And when you think about it, your current wireless bill is paying for all this unnecessary retail space and overhead, not with Mint Mobile.
That's why Mint Mobile has completely reimagined how we buy wireless service, making it all online. And the best part? Without all that overhead and real estate, they pass the savings on to us.
Just as it should be. First off, every plan comes with crazy fast 4G LTE and unlimited nationwide talk and text.
Also, you may use your own phone. That's right. You don't have to buy a new phone and change numbers to get this kind of a deal. Your current phone will work with any Mint Mobile plan, so you can keep your same phone number along with all of your existing contacts.
I can tell you right now, I don't care how good any deal is. If I had to change my number and go through all that, no way.
Well, we all had to suffer through that when you did that before. Well, look, let's say you're not 100% satisfied. Don't worry. Mint Mobile has your back. You can always take advantage of their 7-day money-back guarantee.
To get your new wireless plan for just $15 a month and get the plan shipped to your door for free, go to mintmobile.com/AL. That's mintmobile.com/AL.
Cut your wireless bill to $15 a month at mintmobile.com/AL.
I'm Holly, and my husband William and I listen to Astonishing Legends every weekend for date night.
The couple that listens to AL together stays together. Let's get back to the show.
Well, so Rich, you had a story too, right?
Yeah. You want to hear it?
Yeah, I mean, you have a story too, Rob. Who wants to go next? I'll leave it up to you guys.
Rich, you go ahead. I think mine's a good one to end on.
Okay,
here,
good.
So.
Okay.
All right. Well, this is a story that was told to me this is probably like 1979. I think I was 13. So, we're going back decades. I was going up to spend the weekend at the cabin of some family friends. And I was with my family, obviously. And so this is up in the Crestline area, which is near Lake Arrowhead, right outside of Los Angeles. So as we're heading up, my friend aunt says, there's some people up who are neighbors of ours, and they used to live in a house that had a ghost, and maybe you can ask them about it. So later that evening, once we were all up there and it was after dinner, I'm a little bit nervous because I'm still a kid and I'm talking to people who are basically strangers and they're grown-ups, but I really wanted to know. So I said, hey, I hear that you guys had a ghost in your house. And this is a family, I won't give their name, but there was a father and a mother and 2 kids that were about my age. And I will say right away that Dad sort of goes, I'll let her tell it. And he gets up and moves off to another part of the room and starts talking to other people, which in my mind was sort of him saying, they had an experience. I did not have an experience, which I later then came to find is common in these haunted house stories. Certain members of the family are like, oh, this happened. And others just, nope, I was there. I lived through it. Nothing happened.
Right.
Anyway, the mom started telling the story. And this is the story she told. And it stuck with me forever. And I've told it a bunch of times to my friends. But it just sticks with me because to me, it's very human and very scary and very funny and sad. And it's just kind of got everything. So this house is purchased in California. It's a new house, recent construction. This is not the story of an old, creaky Victorian house. The family buys the house, and the dad is away on business. So the mom and the 2 kids occupy the house, and it's their first day. They move in. They've got some stuff there, and now it's time to go to bed. They all go to bed, and the mom suddenly wakes up, and she has the overwhelming feeling that someone is in the house. Feeling of a presence. And she's never done this before in her life. She sits up in bed, she's staring, and the door begins to open. And 2 dark figures run into the room and jump on the bed. It's her kids. It takes her a minute to process this, and she's terrified. And she says, what's going on? What are you guys doing in here? And they're like, we're really scared. We both just woke up. We think there's someone in the house. So she's like, okay, we're all going to stay right here tonight. And the kids stayed in bed with her that night. And the next morning they wake up, and now in daylight, things aren't quite as scary. A couple days later, Dad comes home, starts staying there. And in these first few weeks, as they live in the house, the mom and the 2 kids begin to notice something. Things will go missing, and then they'll reappear. But they'll reappear in a different place in the house. Something will disappear from one of the kids' desks and then show up in the middle of the floor. Hours later, sometimes days later, The mom and the two kids have these experiences. The dad has no experience whatsoever. But they begin among the three of them to feel that maybe there's a ghost in the house. One night, the four of them are out, I think seeing a movie, something like that, and they all come home. The mom goes into the kitchen and she's washing her hands at the kitchen sink. It's late at night. She looks up, there's a window above the sink, and she just happens to glance up just in time to see a woman in a very, very old-fashioned green dress walk past the window outside. And she is terrified, but also intrigued because maybe this is the ghost. So she goes upstairs to tell the kids. And as she's going upstairs, the kids are running downstairs. And the mom says, "What's going on?" And they're like, "We saw the ghost." She doesn't say anything. "What did you see?" And the boy says, "I opened my closet. There was a lady there in a green dress." Okay, so now they think there's really something going on. Now it's Christmas time. They have a Christmas party for all of their new neighbors and for a lot of the dad's coworkers. Big Christmas party. And as the mom is moving through the party, she overhears a conversation where one person is talking to another about how this other woman at the party is a psychic and sometimes can pick up on things and is able to communicate with the dead. And so the mom pulls her aside and says, "Hey, this is kind of crazy. I heard what you were saying. I actually think there's a ghost in this house. And I'm wondering if you know anything about that or could tell me anything about that." And this other woman says, "Well, I didn't sense anything, but if you guys want, let's go upstairs. We'll do an impromptu seance." So during the Christmas party, the mom, this other woman, the psychic woman, the other friend who that woman was talking to, but neither of the two kids go upstairs into an unoccupied room just so this other psychic woman can maybe plug into something. They do an impromptu seance. And what this woman gets is there's a woman here and her name is Maggie. And she lived in the area somewhere around here, but it was at least 100 years ago, maybe more. So if this story was being told to me in 1979, we're going back to 1879, maybe the 1860s in California. Now they have a name, Maggie. And at that point, they start addressing this ghost in their house as Maggie. And once they do, their communication is facilitated. In other words, the kids will be upstairs in their room doing homework and the lights will go out. And they'll go, "Maggie, would you please turn the lights on?" And then the lights go back on. Doors will open and close late at night when they're trying to sleep. "Maggie, would you please stop?" It stops. Items go missing. "Maggie, I need that back." And then sooner or later, the item comes back. This communication becomes very common and very comfortable. No one is afraid. They have some family relatives come over. Another family stays with them for Easter, and they don't mention anything about the ghost because why would you? Why scare people? But it's Sunday morning now, and they're all getting ready to go to church, and one of their cousins can't find his shoes. Now, everyone in the family, there's got to be 10 people in the house now, start looking for this kid's shoes. Nobody can find the shoes. So mom slips away into the laundry room. She goes into the laundry room because you can contact Maggie more clearly if you stand near an appliance that uses water. I don't know how they figured this out, but they did. So she sneaks off into the laundry room, finds herself standing near the washing machine and saying, "Maggie, we're late for church. We really got to get these shoes back. If there's anything you can do, we would really appreciate it." She steps out of the laundry room and she hears some member of the other family that's come to visit say, "Oh my God." They all walk into the dining room, which is in the middle of the house, a room everyone has walked through dozens of times looking for these shoes, and they all see the same thing at the same time. The shoes are in the middle of the dining room table, pointed toe to toe. Well, this goes on for months. Now it's fall, and the family goes on a vacation. They go to Hawaii, and they have the girl down the street house sit for them. Again, they don't say anything about what's been going on in their house because maybe it would be tough to get a house sitter. But the teenage girl from down the street comes over and is staying at the house. 2 days into their vacation, the young woman calls them up and says, "I'm not going to house sit for you anymore." And they say, "Why not?" And she says, "Something is happening upstairs. I've been here late at night. I hear doors slamming, lights are going on and off. I'm really, really scared. I don't know what's happening. I don't want to go back to your house. I'm so sorry." They all look at each other and they're like, "Oh, listen, you know what? It's okay. That's just our ghost, Maggie. And if you just talk to her, just go back and talk to her and just go, 'Maggie, would you please stop doing that?' Everything will stop." And the girl from down the street says, "I'm not going to do that. I'm terrified, and the fact that you guys know about this thing and what it is freaks me out, and I'm not going back." The family, the mom, the two kids start to get really worried. They're like, "Okay, this is really bad." They're gone for a week. When they come back to the house, they walk in, and each one of them immediately knows that Maggie is gone. The house feels different. They call out to her. For a few weeks, nothing. No lights, no doors, no missing objects returned, and nothing ever happened again.
That's it?
That's the end of the story.
Wow.
Whatever the house sitter encountered, that was by the time they got back, Maggie had left. So
Now-
the real question here would be, did the house sitter encounter Maggie or something else that chased Maggie off?
Well, the family telling me the story, this had all happened about a year in the past. And they all understood to them instantly what had happened. They had left. Maggie had gotten used to their presence. Someone else started occupying the house. Maggie didn't know who that person was or why they were there. And something about the fact that they left, because they had never left the house for that period of time before. They'd never gone on any trips, and now they were gone for a week. And they all felt that somehow Maggie had been left behind, felt abandoned, and that marked the end of the experience.
Oh, wow. Now, all right, so how did you hear this story again?
It was told to me around a fireplace in the midsummer of 1979.
When you were young, by the people that experienced it?
Friends of friends who had experienced it, and they told the story very straightforward. There was no embellishment. It was just, well, here's some stuff that happened. It's almost like someone telling you about the trip they took to Disneyland. They just reported back what had happened, and they were very open about the fact that, oh, Dad doesn't believe any of this. Nothing ever happened to him, but it was all very real to the other people living in the house.
Was this in your neck of the woods?
I believe this was more in Central California. I live in Southern California. So again, I was 13, but it was the first time I'd ever heard directly from someone who had ever had any experience. And what stayed with me was how sad the ending of the story was.
Yeah.
How not scared they were after that first night, and how quickly it became a part of their life that 3 people in the house understood, assimilated, and lived with in a very easy way. And the 4th person never believed any of it, never had any experiences at all. And that was really hard for me to understand. I'm like, wait a second, if all this stuff was going on and someone else was living in the house, they must have experienced it too. But they didn't, which sort of goes back to that subjective experience thing I was talking about, which is it's either happening or it's not. And that's what we always think. It's happening or it's not. But you could be in the same house, and for you it's happening, and for somebody else it's not.
There's a connection also, I believe, with occupants, well, within a family. That was evidenced in the Kukowski intruder episode way back when.
I love that story.
Yeah, Liz Kukowski and her brother Craig had experienced pretty much the same exact thing years apart in 2 different bedrooms of theirs. Their younger sister, who lived at the end of the hall, nothing at all. And it wasn't just the recurring dream that they would both, Liz and her brother Craig would continue to have. Other minor things that would happen in the house that they would notice. Yeah, the younger sister, like, no, never did. And then, of course, the other interesting story thing is that Liz and Craig themselves never knew that each other were having the same exact recurring dream until years later. And then
I'd never heard a story like that. That is amazing. But that to me is as close to proof as you're ever going to get of anything.
Yeah, people in a family, and I don't know if it has to do with your willingness to believe or your belief system, or is something physical or spiritual about the person. You could be in a tight group and one person just doesn't have it. And I've heard that throughout families as well, with odd things happening. And a good friend of mine who was a fraternal twin in a family of 5, this person had a fraternal twin, but was actually closer to an older sibling who was also a fraternal twin, who was not as close with their fraternal twin. These 2 siblings, in an age group apart, one younger, one older, would have all kinds of strange experiences communally between the 2 of them. There was a strange connection, which you would normally think like, well, that's a twin thing, or that seems more likely between twins, and maybe it's not spiritual or paranormal. It's just a biological thing that they share. But oddly, yeah, this person was closer with their older sibling, and they both saw their father appear in their living rooms moments before he actually passed away, or a significant amount of time before he passed away, which we now know, or Scott and I at least, that it's a crisis apparition of sorts. But what was interesting is that they both then called each other up like, you're not going to believe this. And the other one says, Dad just appeared in the living room. Like, yes. So you can be kind of a server. You can be quantum. You can appear in 2 different places at the same time, apparently.
I've mentioned this on the show before, but I had a friend in college, and we're not related at all. We met in college, grew up different places, different environments. He grew up in the country, in the mountains of North Carolina, and when I was young, I lived in Denver and then in North Carolina, a different part of the state. But he and I, we were only friends a few years because, geographically we went our separate ways. And we're still friends now, but it's like that thing where we talk once or twice a year on Facebook. But we used to finish each other's sentences. It would be like almost like a party trick. People would hang around us to listen to us talk. And I always like, this is what it would be like if I had a twin or something. And we were really good friends. And now that I'm back in North Carolina, I've actually been thinking of reconnecting with him, but we used to both marvel at it. And I haven't in my whole life, all the friends I've had, family, people blood related and not, there's never been that thing. And there was like a weird connection with him that I could never put my finger on. And I always wondered about that.
When's the last time you connected with this person?
Just to say something on a picture on Facebook or something, maybe a few months ago. I don't think he even knows I moved back to North Carolina, actually. He lives in Raleigh and I'm in Greensboro, just a little over an hour away. He's a scientist in Research Triangle Park. So, but it's strange. We used to talk about it a lot. And a lot of things were different. Like, we have different views on things. We weren't the same person by any stretch, but we weirdly, conversationally, just somehow like our dialogue between each other flowed as if it was coming from one person. It was really bizarre. Rob, if you're listening, hello.
Rob took a nap.
It's a different Rob,
this,
but same difference. Yeah. Speaking of which, yes. Rob, let's hear your story. Let's close the show out and with your story.
My story is not personal to me. I've told my stories a million times. So if you want to know them, they're out on my on the internet. I did an episode of my podcast. It's called My Personal Experiences.
Yeah, I listened. It was fascinating. And again, you'll hear the Kangaroo Man, which chills me to the bone.
I don't like that one. That's Our Strange Skies, folks, for those of you listening that don't know who Rob Kristoffersen is. And no, he's not related.
No, not related. I'm not even going to try to get on Ancestry to find out.
Yeah. No, well, there's an E and an O. There's a different, you guys spell it different, I think. So,
exactly. Just one letter off. But what I'm bringing to the table is a couple of UFO stories, and they're interesting for the fact that they involve 2 motorists in 2 different towns in Ohio that ended up, one hit a UFO and the other hit an alien in the same year. So,
everything comes back to Ohio. I just want to quickly interrupt. Yeah. It's far and away the weirdest state in the country. I'm just going to say that right now. Yeah.
It's very strange. But this goes back to 1967, which was a huge UFO flap year. I mean, you guys have covered the Mothman, Point Pleasant and stuff, but all the extra stuff that was happening at that time is usually drowned out by what was happening in Point Pleasant, West Virginia, and the Ohio Valley. Technically, this was like the U.S.'s 3rd straight flap year. There are a number of infamous cases from this time. Forrest, you've mentioned the Malmstrom Air Force Base incident, which happened in March 1967, in which a UFO took the nuclear arsenal offline there.
Right.
There's the Shag Harbor incident, which happened in October, and Before that, there was the Falcon Lake incident in Manitoba, which
The
involved
exhaust burns, right? Yes.
Yes, yeah,
Yeah. And Shag Harbor's Nova Scotia for people that.
Yep.
Yeah.
This is also the year that Ohio residents were hitting UFOs and aliens with their cars.
Which you think they'd be able to avoid being a higher existing intelligence. You'd think they would have a better backup cameras and a better sense about themselves.
Yeah, maybe now, but 1967, not so much. The first incident goes back to March 28th of that year. It's around 2:20 a.m. And 20-year-old David Morris was driving home from work. And while cresting a hill in Monroe Falls, he caught sight of an orange-red glowing cone-shaped object 25 feet high and 12 feet wide, hovering several feet above a field to his left. When he looked back to the road, he could see 4 or 5 short beings that were stocky with abnormally large heads, but he couldn't tell if they were wearing helmets or not. He couldn't really make out a whole lot of details, but they were short. They were between 3.5 and 4 feet tall. And they also seemed to be glowing themselves, this strange orange color. And the small figures were running very quickly back and forth across the road with much more speed and agility that Morris could. And they seemed to be moving with purpose from a drainage ditch on the north side of the road to the south side and back again. The figures gave no notice of the motorist. They didn't pay attention to him at all, and he tried to slam on his brakes. But unfortunately, he hit one of the beings with his car. It produced a loud thump, and he claimed to see an arm fly up in the air, and it looked like this person was wearing some kind of mittens because he couldn't see his hand. And whatever he had hit, it produced a strong metallic odor for some reason.
Ooh.
He went forward about 8 to 10 feet. He slammed on his brakes, and he looked back, and he could see the other beings were now gathering around the injured one. And Morris became very frightened because he came to the realization that what he had hit was non-human, and he was pretty sure that they were going to kill him. So the report states that he, quote, burned rubber and drove away as quickly as possible from the area. And Morris just sat in his house. He was shaken for like a few hours until he finally calmed himself down, climbed the stairs to his bedroom, and went to sleep. Upon later examination, he found a few bumps and scratches on the front of his bumper. The case was reported to the Aerial Phenomena Research Organization, and researchers weren't able to find evidence of the landed craft, but they stated that they could see Morris's skid marks on the road. There were a number of strange cases in 1967 involving UFOs, aliens, and cars. In another case in Riri, Idaho, a UFO stopped a car in the middle of a rural road, and an alien being came out. It floated out of the craft and actually came over to the car, opened the door, pushed the two guys in the front seat over, got behind the wheel, and drove this thing into a field.
Wow.
So they got carjacked and taken hostage.
Yeah, and this encounter was brief, but the two witnesses, Guy Tossi and Will Begay, they were traumatized for life after that. But back to
wasn't insured to drive the car.
Wait, what happened after they got into the field?
One of the guys, because it came to a stop, the car came to a stop. One of the guys jumped out of the vehicle and ran to this nearby farmhouse. The other one cowered in the passenger seat, looking at the alien being. The alien being's trying to talk to him, but he can't understand what he's saying because it's in these like weird chirping sounds and stuff. And the alien being
gets animated.
It would be amazing to see an animation of this. The alien being gets out. He meets up with another alien being that was in the vehicle, in the craft. They both float back to the craft, and it takes off.
So he really just needed a ride from the road back to his original ride.
Yeah, it seems like that.
Yeah.
But the interesting thing is that 2 hours after this encounter, a few miles from where it took place, there was another guy driving a truck who was stopped in the middle of the road by a UFO, and an alien being got out and tried to get into his vehicle.
Oh. Well, it's fun. No, but I mean, from a logical point, if they're just curious about, like, well, what is your craft drive like? Well, this is,
Yeah.
you have to work this thing. Oh, there's a wheel and a stick shift and a clutch. Like, well, this is kind of fun.
Yeah.
Wouldn't you want to fly UFO?
Kind of.
Yeah.
But I'd probably crash that thing.
It'd be like Baby Yoda trying to fly, but
The car stories don't end there.
yeah.
So back in Ohio, yeah, the UFOs, they just were not done with the motors yet. And on July 13th at 11:30 p.m., Robert Richardson was driving around with his buddy Jerry Quay in the town of White House. And as they rounded a bend, a brilliant blue light sat in the middle of the road. And Richardson, he knew he was going to come into contact with this thing, so he closed his eyes, he slammed on his brakes, and he braced for impact. And the vehicle came into contact with something. He couldn't actually make out a craft of any kind. The light was too bright. But when Richardson opened his eyes, whatever it was that had been there in the road was gone. The two men contacted the police, who really dismissed the account. The state police came out. They were able to find his skid marks in the road, but they weren't able to find anything else. There were no other traces of any kind. But the next morning, when Richardson went outside to examine his car, he found a chunk of metal stuck in the grill. And the hood had scratch marks on it, and part of the chrome on the bumper had been shaved away. On July 15th, 2 days later, he reported the sighting to Jim and Coral Lorenzen, the founders of APRO, Aerial Phenomena Research Organization. And he gave them their phone number and told them to contact him. On the night of the 16th, at approximately 11 p.m., Richardson received a visit from two friendly men. Okay. They drove up in a 1953 black Cadillac, and they stayed for about 10 minutes. They were asking him questions. It was kind of a pleasant conversation. And when they left, Richardson had the state of mind to write down the plate number, and he found that it wasn't a plate issued to any car that he knew of. So about a week after that encounter, two other men wearing black suits that looked, quote, foreign, arrived on his doorstep. They demanded that he hand over the metal and the bumper to him. But he informed them that he had given them to the Colorado Project, also known as the Condon Committee, which had taken over the government's investigation of UFO reports at that time. And one of the men looked coldly into Robert Richardson's eyes and stated point blank, "If you want your wife to stay as pretty as she is, you'd better get the medal back." After stating this, the two men left in a 1967 Dodge sedan. He never saw them again. In March of 1968, tests were conducted on the metal by a man named Roy Craig. He found that the area where the chrome had been stripped away was composed of 92% magnesium. It was unusual, but nothing so out of the realm of the ordinary to really make note of. But it should be noted that the only people that he told his story to were the Lorenzens, a researcher named Nils Paquette, and his wife, and that was it. So somehow these men, as they always do, found out, and they asked for the medal back. And that is the tales of two motorists hitting UFOs and aliens with their cars.
Well, did he actually give them these MIBs, any materials that he had?
They never came back. That's the
No,
thing.
they
They
never
came
came
and
back.
said, "You better get back,"
Yeah.
and he did
Yeah.
get it back, but they didn't come back.
Right, that always seems to be the thing. It's almost kind of an empty threat because they never usually do come back.
In this timeline,
Yeah,
in
well,
this reality,
Yeah, but that's always you're right. That is one thing where they make a threat, and that seems to be the end of it, unless people have disappeared somehow. But you never hear about that. It's just that they make this threat in a more material way. I have a friend of a friend did go to Freedom Ridge, I think, overlooking Area 51. Didn't trespass, just was up on the ridge, and then got a visit a week later from some government-looking men. And in that, you could say, like, they were able to see his license plate. It just seems a little weird that they would follow up on that at all.
Yeah.
He didn't do anything. He wasn't taking pictures. He was just kind of, on a day drive around the area. And it was just kind of that empty threat. It's like, yeah, you better not go up there again. It's like, I don't intend to. I don't know what you want. It was just kind of weird. Like, you would go that far or send out a
Yeah.
regional person to go rattle this guy's tree.
Yeah, like why can't it all be benign? Why can't they all be given us space pancakes? Like,
John
gotta do?
Solomon, was it? Who was the?
It's Simonton.
That's it, John Simonton. Which weren't very good, apparently.
I didn't get this out earlier. I think I mentioned it on last week's episode or the last episode of the show, but I was about to get an introduction to Brandon Fugel, the current owner of Skinwalker, and it all fell apart because of the Rona, the coronavirus.
Yeah.
So like, I think because my friend that was going to make the introduction for me, who actually knows a lot of people that know him, he's also from Utah, but he currently lives in Kirkland in Seattle, which is was the original hotspot. And then now, I guess, he still wanted to make the introduction for me, but he's speculating it might not be the best time because Mr. Fugel is heavily involved and made of real estate. And because of what's going on with the virus, developers and real estate brokers are not in a great spot. So he's like, I could do this introduction now, but you might want to wait. So I think I'm going to hold off for a minute.
Well, his approach here, to finish up that earlier conversation, is going to be different, and it ties in with what Rich was saying, in that it's a much different approach to what Robert Bigelow and NIDS, the is it National Institute of Discovery Science?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
What their research body was doing, and I believe I heard this in Ryan Sprague's interview with MJ Banias on Ryan's podcast, Somewhere in the Skies. MJ Banias was talking about Brandon Fugel's approach and how it's going to be different. It seems like NIDS would do more kind of experiments with the phenomenon, trying to get it to react, where they would do things like, apparently they'd have like a plexiglass box and there would be children's toys inside, some electronic, to see if they could be interacted with, and then try and record that. Whereas Fugel's point is really more just about gathering data, gathering information. They're not going to try anything that's going to provoke anything. They're not going to poke the bear or the bee's nest. They're just going to try and monitor stuff. Yes, Rich, you had a point you wanted to make.
No, I'm just showing off my glass.
I see. Oh, that doesn't really translate well for the listening audience, but that's what Rich is doing.
Doesn't matter. It's for the viewers.
Okay.
I think they know what we're talking about. My wife is afraid of these glasses, by the way.
Oh.
She really doesn't like the
custom
Krampus one. She's like, I don't want. Get me a drink, but not in that Krampus. But what's funny is she's like, I'll take I like the one. I just like the one with the two guys. I'm like, you mean Scott and Forrest because they're little cartoons?
Yeah.
She's like, yeah, the one with the two guys. I'm like, yeah, that's Scott. You've met them. You've been on their show. That's them. That's Scott and Forrest. And she's like, yeah, those
the one
guys.
with the two guys.
Well, it's the other one that seems kind of benign is the Disco Wizard one, which looks a little like Jeffree Star, the YouTube.
Yeah, he does.
YouTube
A little bit.
In that realm.
Well, listen, guys, we want to thank you so much for coming on. It was a fun show. If people actually listen to this one, maybe we'll do it again.
Hell yeah.
Why am I always on the ones where it's like, okay, well, if anyone actually listens to this,
no, I tell you what, Rich, listen. This is one thing, and I wanted to talk a little bit of our inside baseball even during this episode tonight. We do still want to get to for 2020. We'd love to cover the Hungry Ghost finally, and the Vertical Plane.
Vertical Plane,
and also that chapter from, I think it was, I can't remember which book it was from.
That is the
one
Hungry
of those
Ghost,
two,
I believe.
about the surgeon. Was that from the Hungry Ghost that came back and operated after he was dead on people?
Yeah.
Okay.
Plus, I have another idea for an episode that may, I don't know, you guys may really be into it or maybe not. Maybe you've already talked about doing it, but I don't want to say what it is because it's a big one.
Okay.
But it absolutely fits under astonishing and legends.
Ooh,
so anyway, but we'll talk about it offline.
Color me intrigued. One last thing, as an epilogue thing, Rob, what is that thing that was following the International Space Station last month?
It's what I would call space debris. I don't think it's anything.
Okay. How do you know? I know. I'd love to tease.
I'm speculating just as much as you are.
All right, then. It was intriguing to say the least. I'll give it that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, thanks, fellas.
Right.
Rich is doing his Bender impression from Futurama. That's the character.
Yeah.
The metal.
You guys, you got to check out the video. If you can get the video of this, it is riveting.
It is. Yeah, 2 hours of four dudes.
Five.
Yeah.
Bon
And
Jovi's here.
in
Bon
spirit,
Jovi's here.
yes, John Bon Jovi, who looks the best out of all of us. But thank you so much again for your time, and I feel a real in these trying times. I feel a real sense of community needs to be kept up, and you guys have buoyed
Yes.
my spirits this week and into the next. So thank you so much for your time, and always interesting conversation. And I hope to do this again not too long from now.
All right.
Yeah.
Thanks, you guys. This was great.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
Fortean, Buzzkills, and Rich signing off. That's going to wrap up our first Fortean, Buzzkills, and Rich Roundtable. We'll be back next week with a new show. Special thanks to both Rich Hatem and Rob Kristoffersen. You can find Rich's latest work, the Titan series, on the DC Universe app in the United States and on Netflix in other countries. And Rob Kristoffersen's podcast, Our Strange Skies, is available everywhere you get your podcasts.
Please remember to support our sponsors. They help keep the show free and the lights on in Blanket Forteana.
Special thanks to John Bolin.
My name is Adam Michaels,
Hi, I'm Holly Otten.
Hi, I'm William Otten, and I give permission to Astonishing Legends.
Michels,
Hi, I'm Becky Scott.
and
Our show is edited by Sarah Voorhees Wendell and co-produced by Tess Feifel, who is also our head of research.
Our theme, which is available as a ringtone, was composed by Judson Crane, and our sound design and additional composing is by Ryan McCullough.
Special thanks to the Astonishing Research Corps.
But most importantly, we want to thank you, our listeners. Visit our store at astonishinglegends.com or interact with us and other listeners on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram.
You can also support the show at patreon.com/astonishinglegends, where patrons have access to additional bonus content. No part of this show may be reproduced anywhere without permission. Copyright Astonishing Legends Productions.
Good night.
You guys ready to go back?
Yeah, why not? Let's give her a sync clap.
Hang on. Make it a marker. Okay. 5, 4, 3,
3,
2,
1.
1.
God, that's crazy how that cannot line up. It doesn't line up.
Yeah, or it's going over the magic of the internet. It's all over the place.
As long as you can get it close, that's all that matters.